What are the country's top CEOs doing to build extraordinary teams and cultures who thrive even during a pandemic? You're about to take a deep dive into the minds of wildly successful C-suite leaders who are evolving the way that we work in the 21st century. Welcome to this special edition of How to Be Mesmerizing. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and in this special Mesmerizing CEO Secrets, we have another extraordinary guest with us. Dustin Wells is on the show. Dustin, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Oh, I'm really glad to have you. So let me introduce you to everybody. So Dustin is the CEO of Headspring, a company recognized by Inc. 500 for its rapid growth in 10 cities across 3 countries. His company has been on the best places to work list for 8 consecutive years. And he's also the co-founder of Workify. So we've got a lot to learn from Dustin. He's passionate. He's an angel investor. He loves helping other entrepreneurs. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because as super smart as you are, you could hoard all that information, but you don't. You like give it all away, you know, and we'll talk about how you love empowering your competitors, which is something that is brilliant. And a lot of people are going to be interested in hearing about. You've also served as president for both the Austin chapters of Entrepreneurs Organization and Technology Entrepreneur Exchange, where you've helped lots of business owners to scale their companies, and lots of leadership awards and recognitions, including Austin's Rockstar Entrepreneur of the Year Award, which is very cool. So we're going to dive right into that brilliant mind of yours, Dustin. So the last time we were chatting, you told me that you were influenced by an idea in the classic book, Good to Great, about the importance of identifying the critical belief system of your organization. So explain what that means.
Yeah, so Good to Great was written by Jim Collins, and or he was one of the authors there. But he actually published a white paper in Harvard Business Review a couple of years before the book. And that's where I stole this idea of a core ideology. And so, you know, there's mission, vision, values. Those terms are thrown around a lot, and frankly, companies use them differently depending on who you talk to. And so, what I appreciated about what Jim Collins wrote about in this HBR article is around the core ideology and how you tie these things together. And for me, when I read that and started working through that, it was a goal for me to maybe create that foundation from which we can then grow and make our decisions. And so part of that ideology is like core values, core purpose, a vivid picture is what they call it as well. Those are elements of that.
Yeah. So why is it important to know what the belief system is? I love that phrase. And how is it a little different from, you know, corporate mission statement?
Yeah. So I think in my case, and I think a lot of founders, the business reflects our personality a lot. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the people that we hire that come work with me at Headspring or at Workify or any company I'm involved in, mm-hmm. They bring a certain unique set of skills and experiences to the table. Mm-hmm. But we have a different maybe way that we think about the world, or maybe a different value system. And there's no value judgment on a value system necessarily, but it's important that we're really deliberate with what we believe, because then these really intelligent, smart people can make decisions that are in alignment with that, but then also leveraging their background and experience as well. So I think that as a foundation is really critical. And it took us about, I think, 10 years into the business before we actually got deliberate about that.
Yeah. I remember having this conversation with the CEO. We were getting ready to do some more training together, and we were talking about how challenging it was because we had this set of values, and we had some people that were a part of the organization that said, well, I'll live the values while I'm here between these walls, but when I go home, you know, I've got my own set of values that I live by. And we were trying to determine whether that was a good fit. You know, we were considering some of these people we were talking about were in sales, and we were curious about the things they were posting on their own time, and, you know, how that fit into our values, if people ever decided to look up the salesperson that they were working with. So it was interesting.
Yeah, I think I used to show up at work with not a different set of values, but a different persona.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking back 10 years ago again. And so I would wear, a button-down shirt and maybe slacks and dress the part, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it lacked congruence for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem I have with what you just said, like, I feel like I never thought about going to social media for our team. I know that a lot of companies do this and see what they're posting personally, because I want to keep that separate. But that's a really interesting way to think about it. Is a customer going to look up a salesperson and look at what they're posting personally, and how does that align, and is it congruent with the values of the company? Like, I hadn't thought about that, but that's pretty scary. And so I think what is important though is congruence. And so I try to show up in a congruent way. But there's fun ways that we've done that. So like, we have t-shirts, and I'm wearing this one today. We like to knock off pop icons and then make them ours. And so at Headspring, everyone wants to wear t-shirts because we have a lot of really smart knowledge workers.
Yes.
And they want to be comfortable. But we're also in consulting where clients are paying us a lot of money to do important projects. So the rule is, you can wear t-shirts, but it has to be a Headspring branded shirt. And that made us create like a cool shirt. But what does that have to do with congruence? Well, if they want to dress that way personally, how do we give them an outlet to do that, but still be congruent with the culture and who we are?
Yeah, very good. Well, I like how you were finding common ground and bridges, right, to try to bring that together. I think that's very smart. You have to be who you are wherever you go. Too many people are wearing two different hats, one at work and one at home. And that's a lot of pressure. It creates a lot of stress. Sometimes you don't know which hat you're wearing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, by me doing that, I think it actually invites other people to do the same. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about, and this is actually kind of cliche now, because a lot of people say this, but I don't know how much they mean it. Like, we want to encourage people to bring their full selves to work, and their authentic selves to work. And so how do we do that? And so I have to model that. And if I'm bringing one self to work and then I'm a different person at home, then that's not congruent, and that's not going to model the right behavior either.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got to kind of set the lead, right? People do what their leaders do. And so when you're showing up in that authentic way, and then just having those conversations to really find out where they're at. I mean, that's how we did it, Dustin. We ultimately would sit down with people, and the goal was, we want to care about people so much that when they go home, they have that spirit, and that's what they convey when they're in there doing their posting on whatever it is. It's not a bunch of hate or slander or posts that would be embarrassing. It would be, we care about you so much when you're at work that you take that attitude home, and you hopefully bring those attitudes with you, at home as well.
I mean, that would be an ideal world. I think I'm secretly on a mission to help develop conscious leaders, and we might talk more about this later, but I think how people show up at home, we're all leaders, right? We whether it's in our families or in a church group or in boards that we're a member of, or just in different thought leader groups, like, people might see us as a leader. And so how do we show up in a way that really shows good self-awareness, that we're not there to run our own agenda through, but we're there to add value? Yeah. And I think we're not super deliberate about that in the company, but we definitely talk about conscious leadership a lot. And I'm hoping people take that home.
Yeah. Well, maybe we become more deliberate, and it's not your secret mission anymore. It's just your mission. I mean, you've already been recognized for it, and after having a conversation with you, I immediately wanted you on the show. And so, so it's just you stepping into who you were born to be.
Yeah, I'm excited that other people might hear this, and that certain tidbits might inspire them to go think about things in a different way.
That's awesome. Very good. All right. So question number 2. So you talk about the importance of having a double bottom line, one for people and the other for profits, which I think is great. And also be cautious. This is the part that I really liked. You said, be cautious not to borrow from one to pay the other.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, this comes out of what's called a stakeholder orientation, and where I learned about it was from conscious capitalism, which is an up and coming movement that actually was started in Austin, where I'm located. But there's 4 tenets there, but one of them is around the stakeholder orientation, and this was an interesting shift for me because the traditional mind of business says that the purpose of a corporation is to create shareholder value, which sounds like really silly saying it out loud in today's world. But I'm sure when that came out, it made perfect sense. But that's one stakeholder of many that create that value. And so in the old world, we had this paradigm of like zero-sum game, and this still exists today, frankly, largely, where in order to create value from one stakeholder, I have to extract value from another one. And so if I want to create more value for customers, then I'm going to extract value from my employees to create that value for customers. Or social impact, right? If we talk about profit and purpose, they're like, that's interesting, but in order to create value for purpose, am I just taking from profits to do that? Or is there a way to have all of these stakeholders represented in a model where we can create mutual value together without eroding value from one to create it for the other?
That's a powerful question. I really believe in the power of questions, and that if you ask the right question, the answer becomes obvious. And that was a really powerful question of how do we create both, right? Not even is it a question, is it possible, but we ask it as though it's an assumption that it is possible, and how do we create both without robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I love how you said that. It's definitely possible. It forces us to think creatively. And that one way of thinking has shifted a lot of our business in the last couple of years as far as how we make decisions. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that, like, if we have a customer that's upset, I might temporarily take a hit as a company to make things right for that client. Mm-hmm. But in the long term, we're creating mutual value together. So it's not just in an instance you can analyze that, but you have to analyze it over the lifespan of all those stakeholders too.
Yeah. And if you have that framework, I love it, Dustin. And if you have that framework and that model that you're using, if that's your core ideology, of being able to provide value to everyone that you touch, then I had someone else on here, Nancy Pouch, and she said, I just want to be a ripple of goodness. It's just a ripple that goes out everywhere, and so, but then, you do end up having more profit. So I've had clients where I needed to refund them, private coaching clients, when I realized we weren't going to be a good fit for each other. And, mm-hmm. I had to give them a big refund check before they even asked for it, because I knew that it was the right thing to do. And I didn't want to take that financial hit. But they were so shocked that I was willing to let them out of the program so easily, and it was my idea because we both felt it, that they ended up referring me 3 other high-value clients. And so I made even more money from somebody who I wasn't even able to help.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think in a world, we're in the consulting business, and, we refer to our team as people, which might sound crazy and out of left field, but a lot of in the consulting business, like, people are referred to as resources, right? Mm-hmm. And the day of like the resources are something to be leveraged, there's something to be used, there's something to, towards an end, right? And all business is about people. And so I use the word resources when I'm talking about money and time and talent and everything together. But if I'm just talking about people, we talk about people. Like, so there's subtleties in how we relate to others. And I think that this mindset that we're talking about is one bridge to maybe get there.
That is deep insight there. Your words are very powerful. And if we start thinking of people as commodities, or just resources, then, we're dehumanizing them. But when you think about, hey, these people actually have families, and they think, and they have the same hopes and dreams, worries and fears as you and me, we've got to make sure that we're always bringing the humanity back in.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to tie that up.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So you have no problem, and I love this about you. You have no problem letting people know that you kind of are indignant about that zero-sum game kind of attitude and mentality, with a motto of achieve at all costs, regardless of what you have to do to get there. So how did you get to the point where you are very confident saying, I'm not buying that kind of attitude anymore?
Yeah, so someone asked me, it was like a year ago, what are you indignant about? Mm-hmm. And I had to really think about it because I didn't know. But where that the answer to that question lies something that you're really passionate about and something that's meaningful to you. And I realized, and without getting political, and I won't pick any sides because it's represented on all sides in all countries.
Yeah.
There are leaders who are more concerned with their own self-interest than they are about the constituents they serve, whether they're CEOs, whether they're elected officials, or just the idea that you'll put your own self-interest above other stakeholders, i.e. create value for yourself at the expense of others, is really what we're talking about. Yeah. And that to me is a traditional kind of old mindset. It's a zero-sum game mindset versus an abundance mindset. Yeah. And I think that is the core problem of where we're at today as a world. Like the world as a projection of like everything going on that's negative, from whether it's natural disasters or politics in numerous countries with leaders that aren't showing up for their constituents, or corporations that are literally destroying more value in the earth than they're creating financially. If you measured those things, which is really interesting. Like these are all representations of that mindset of kind of win at all costs. Yeah. And it's just, one, it's proven that you don't have to do that. And you can still be successful otherwise. And then two, like that's not a sustainable model, at least not, maybe it is in your lifetime, but it's definitely not sustainable as a race for us to continue to operate that way.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. You know, the best leaders have to be able to look at the bigger picture, you know, of what's happening, and not just in your lifetime, but especially if you're a large company, you know, your children, your grandchildren, as well as being able to have the balance of, you know, sometimes we got to figure out how am I going to get through this week,
yeah.
You know, in the next 5 steps in front of us. So, you know, the ability to do both is very valuable. I think I'm indignant about that as well. We share that philosophy.
Good.
Yeah. And like you said, you know, it's been proven that you can care about the planet, you can care about people, and actually become more profitable as a result. And I really feel like that's where we are going collectively as a society, almost because we have to, if we want to hang out on this planet. So
yeah,
Elon Musk isn't going to be able to build rocket ships fast enough to get people to live on Mars because we've chewed up this planet. You know, we really got to have a different approach.
Yeah, that's exciting, but I agree. Like, and what stops us from destroying that planet next, right?
Yeah, really.
And you know,
that planet already. I mean, if you think about living on Mars, what that would be like, that's what Earth would be like if we used up all our resources.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so I think, you know, the other secret mission I'm on is how do we grow Headspring, and as an example that you can get big by doing good, yes. Right? Getting big is exciting, and that creates new challenges. It also creates opportunities for our team, and it creates the ability for us to solve bigger problems for our clients. But I love, and even at our size now, and we're by no means a large company. We're about 120 people right now. Mm-hmm. You know, it's still actually, I love when people come to me and they're taking what we do and taking it for themselves. Mm-hmm. And then they're creating a successful business from some of the same practices that we used. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And it's not because it's an ego thing for me or a recognition thing. Like they've only told me, it's not like they're publishing that I took all this from Headspring and now I did this thing. Like, I don't want them to do that. I want them to own it and have it be theirs. Yeah. And so I think that's really exciting. And then around the conscious leadership and self-awareness, like how do we create leaders that understand and think about the way that we're talking about things today and these different paradigms? Because that's how we're going to solve these problems, I think, long term. That's excellent. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the best conscious leaders are the ones who are developing other leaders, conscious leaders. Yeah. So that, you know, you have more people who are doing good and have values and are caring about each other. We're all going to win. You know, that tide rises all ships, right? And that's what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah. Leaders of character. I heard that at the Air Force Academy like a week ago. I was out there and they're focused on building leaders of character. And so I might steal that from them and see if I can bring it to life in a new way. Wow. I like that. I'm going to write that down. Yeah. Let me know what you do with that. I mean, that's what you're doing. That's just a cool way of describing what you're already doing. Yeah. But I feel like, you know, with the challenge I have in my business is I feel like there's a dotted line to purpose, so to speak, where the work we're doing is meaningful. we're developing our team, and we're doing interesting work together. Like there's a lot of things that are purposeful. Some of the clients, a lot of our clients, the impact we're having is really meaningful for them, and their missions are really inspiring in themselves.
Yeah.
And so like, but I'd rather have a solid line to purpose in a way that is more deliberate. Instead of talking about my secret missions, I'd rather have those be the core of what we're doing. And we happen to be in a software business. So I'm challenged with that and trying to work through that, how to reconcile those two things.
Yeah. Well, just say it. I mean, that's what's happening right now. This is the conversation where you come out.
Yeah.
We're having it right now.
Here's
brother.
all of our secret missions.
They're no more secret.
Be
yeah. I mean, they're definitely not a secret now because I'm telling everybody what you're saying.
That's right.
Right. So yeah, I mean, you're just talking about it all the time as though it's just who you are and what you do, because it is who you are and what you do. You're just allowing the words to catch up with it now, and maybe perhaps being more bold when you're talking about it. And then that'll really be you being in alignment again, having that authenticity. And then
the congruence.
Yeah, exactly right. Awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
So you did say, and we've touched on it a little bit, that there seems to be a bit of a polarity growing between leaders who are more conscious versus those who seem to lack a bit of self-awareness. I don't think that's just with leadership. I think that's in general human beings. We can only really live up to our own level of self-awareness. And sometimes people think that they're a lot more self-aware, or they have a higher level of emotional intelligence than they actually do. So what are you seeing in the business world with leaders? Yeah,
I love how you said that we can only rise to the level of our self-awareness. And I think that's exactly right. In the polarity, there's definitely people like you or me, and there's a lot of us that believe in kind of this new way of thinking and doing business and operating in the world to create mutual value. Yeah. And it seems like there's more and more leaders that are also completely on the opposite side, where it's zero-sum game, like win at all costs. It's whatever benefits them, right now. It's really coming from a place of them wanting to be seen, maybe, or I use the word ego too, but that might create a whole separate podcast we can talk about. But I think it's coming from their desire to be recognized or seen in a certain way. Yeah. And I think that's the problem that we're facing. And so this is really about psychology and development, right? If we at its core, I mean, you're the expert there way more than me, but this feels like a stunted, like, psychological growth in really successful people. So it's not meant to be a criticism, but and it works for them, so they keep doing it, I guess. But at the same time, again, I guess if we tie it back to the stakeholder model, they're creating lots of value for themselves or maybe for certain stakeholders, but they're also destroying value for others to do that. Yeah. It goes back to, pulling from one to feed the other instead of having that abundance mentality. And you're right, it is unfortunate. It often comes from unconscious beliefs and insecurity, or being taught that fighting is the only way to win, and so you're constantly in conflict, or the old belief that vulnerability is weakness, so you can never show weakness or someone will take you out. And so you got to be the tough, strong, focused one. So, but the more we have conversations like this, the more and more people are saying, hey, there's a better way. We want a better way. And so some of that old mentality I think it's fading, but there's always going to be insecurity. More human beings are wounded than not. And so we're all looking for a way to meet those unconscious needs that we have. And definitely being powerful, or winning, or being the most successful, or, not only taking the credit when it's good. You're going to have plenty of that because of something that you said too. I've talked to many high-powered CEOs who felt like that attitude was their mojo. That's what got them where they are. That's what got them to the top of the mountain. And they'll be damned if they're going to let that go. And unfortunately, it just doesn't let them get to that next level. That's what's so frustrating, I think, is you can be wildly successful with that model. And so that's just going to propagate the issue, and it's going to continue. And so at what point is there a tipping point or a breaking point of, for lack of a better word, not to get too out there, but a certain tipping point of consciousness where people realize there's a better way and they can still win while bringing everyone else up with us, right? Feels like the right conversation to have.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're still early in that dialogue, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that dialogue will always be in play. It's like playing a video game, and there's always going to be something trying to keep you from beating that level. And that's how the game is played. and so we're never going to show up to a game and there's no villain trying to keep us, because then we wouldn't want to play it. And so I think there's always going to be insecurity. There's always going to be greed, those 7 deadly sins. I think unfortunately it's a part of our human development, unless they give us all pills that wipe that out, and that's not going to be good either.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that is happening that's inspiring is, in the last year, especially as like maybe a year and a half, as tensions rose over racial injustice, or in Texas, the abortion bill that just got passed. I mean, the businesses are speaking with their wallets, and we're talking about big companies that are pulling out of conferences here in Texas because of that law, or that pulled out of certain areas around voter laws and voter restrictions in certain places. I think Georgia was one where a lot of people pulled out. And so luckily businesses are showing up with their wallets, which will make those achievers listen, at least temporarily. And maybe that's part of the shift that we'll see that will help get us on the right path. But it feels like we're a far away from that.
Well, it's an excellent observation. I 100% agree with you. We are in exciting times where consumers, because business for so many people is still about the bottom line. And if you have a whole bunch of customers that are saying, oh, we're not putting up with this, business will adjust. And I really believe that it's the business owners that are going to change the world, not the politicians, right?
Yeah.
And so business owners and entrepreneurs are the people that transform the world. And so with the age of the internet, and I know that there's a lot of, negatives about it, but the positive is that we have more of a voice than ever before, and more people can unite and collaborate than ever before. And so that part of it is very inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. That's what I love about what you're doing and these types of conversations, because hopefully it impacts even just 2 or 3 people, and that impact, and then they can impact 2 or 3 and becomes exponential at some point. Like I remember with the last presidential race, like I can't control who becomes president in that race. No matter which way I vote, like my vote matters. Yes, but in our system, like I'm not going to be able to make that decision, but I can influence who maybe is president in 25 years. If we think about how do we develop conscious leaders, how do we develop leaders that are self-aware, how do we develop leaders that think about things from these new paradigms that we're talking about? And then I would love to elect those people, and that they don't really exist today in politics. And so regardless of which way you vote, you're not voting for someone like that typically. And so in 25 years, I think we can impact the election. So how do we do that and think about the long term? And I put that in quotes because long term might be 100 years or it might be 1,000 years, but 25 years feels like something we can change. But in 4 years, we can't change who's going to run.
No. I mean, that gave me chills. That was awesome, to think that, we keep building up conscious leaders, and then we get conscious politicians, and then we put someone in the White House that has more of that. I mean, I just love that. And not just in the White House. I mean, in every house, if we can just continue to elevate our awareness as
in every house. I like that too. Here's the challenge, I think, though, is there's kind of 2 sets of rules, right? And so this gets frustrating with me. So if I'm playing with the conscious leader rule book, right, we all went together, and I'm with a customer, call it, that comes from a zero-sum game mindset, or in politics, I'm a conscious leader and I'm playing against, a cutthroat zero-sum game leader. Like that feels like 2 different playing fields, and I wonder how that battle goes, because it feels to me like this person's taking the high road and allowing this other behavior. And at what point do you, fight fire with fire, or maybe you don't? Like, I don't know the answer to that, but that's the thing that's frustrating is, and I think that when we go to polarity, like having those 2 sets of rules makes it challenging to make progress on this.
Oh, it does. You're exactly right. So I've been in meetings where we've talked about that. And, the whole executive team is around, and we were actually having a discussion about when you're dealing with people and you're negotiating, what do we do about that? And what we ended up coming up with is that you're successful by who you decide to work with. You're equally successful by who you decide not to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find that you have a supplier or you have somebody that is all they care about is getting the best deal for them, is that really someone you want to be in business with? And so that's like working who you want to work with. If you're competing against somebody, I remember the old slogan, when they go low, we go higher,
Yeah.
and that kind of an idea that over time, watch what happens, and you're going to see we were right with what we told you. And over time, I find that that's exactly what happens. So, and even with in-house, like you might have your best salesperson is a lone wolf, and they're maybe doing some stuff that's pretty unethical, but they're your best performer, right? What do you do in that situation? And what I found is that they usually put together some kind of improvement plan for that person, and if they don't follow along, they usually move them out because they're not fitting the values and the culture. And what I've seen is it allowed everybody else to rise up, and engagement and profits increased. So you just got to decide what you're going to take a stand for. And then in any situation, you allow your values to be your compass in those difficult conversations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, yeah, you said it well.
Yeah. So that happens once in a while.
More than that, I'm sure.
So, all right. So you have developed and continue to foster an incredible workplace culture, even with a bunch of remote workers that you have, which is great. So one way that you've accomplished this is by creating value for everyone with the idea that everyone is a stakeholder. So tell me about that. How did you develop that concept, that belief, that value?
Yeah, so that goes back to this idea of the stakeholder orientation and conscious capitalism. But more specifically, as it applies to business, everyone's stakeholders are different. And an exercise someone could do, and I think this is in the book, but it's easy to find. You create your stakeholder map, and so who are all the people that your business impacts? And for us, it's obviously our people is our huge stakeholder. Our clients are a huge stakeholder. The business we consider a stakeholder, i.e. shareholders maybe, that's a stakeholder. But then we've got local communities that we are members of, especially being remote, we're fully distributed right now. And so how do we think about and understand those stakeholder needs as well? Think about contractors or vendors or partners that we work with, like those are stakeholders. And so this mindset has to apply, but a first kind of tactical step is about mapping that out. So we are really deliberate about like, who are we serving? And then as we make decisions, we can see and think about that mutual value creation versus the extraction kind of method, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. I like that. So, I mean, again, you're just thinking about people as people and caring about everybody that's involved and everybody that you are connected with. So,
yeah. And I think, it's funny because I wasn't always a people person. I had to learn how to do that. One is because I knew I was in that business, and so it started out of a need to want to be a better business and to be a better leader. But it became authentic as a part of who I am over time. And I don't know if that's ever happened to you where, like if you're reading a boring book and you act really interested in it, all of a sudden it becomes interesting maybe. I don't know what the right metaphor is, but for me, it's so much richer of an experience now when you think about, and it's actually the biggest challenge in business, like people, right? It's the best, most enriching part, and it's the biggest challenge. Whether it's hiring or clients or communication, like it's the full experience. But without embracing that, I think there's a lot being missed there, maybe.
Oh, I agree. There's not a maybe. You're definitely right. There's a lot of missed opportunity there. Yeah, that's where the idea of, fake it till you become it came from.
Yeah.
Right. Where the fake it till you make it. But
yeah,
I mean, I remember when I first started doing seminars, I remember somebody told me one time, he said, now, when you do a seminar, get everybody to sit up in their chair real straight and lean forward and act like you're ready to learn the best you've ever learned. Right. And, and so I'd have everybody sit up who are usually slouched over and, resting on their hand, and I'd sit up and create energy. And because a lot of it isn't just what you're learning, it's the state that you're in. Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's where, the other speakers that I won't name specifics on, like, play music and you get up and like they make you stand up and you dance and
yeah. Tony Robbins, he's the father of that, just the rah concert and everything, and people love it. They get addicted just to being in that energy, which is awesome, and I love it. And I've danced around too, walked on the fire and everything else.
Oh wow.
But what I find is that about 3 days after you come home, you get depressed because you're in such a dopamine state of mind. You're on such a high, and then you get out of that environment, you go back home to your family who was not there with you usually, and they're like, calm down, and
you try to explain it and it doesn't have the same power.
Not at all. And then pretty soon you're not around that environment. And then all of a sudden you start to lose the energy, and then you're kind of depressed, and you're waiting for the next seminar to go to. And so, but I love them. I mean, I think they're great, and they do talk about how to maintain high energy. And I just have found that that's more important than your state is your beliefs, your unconscious beliefs. Those are the rules. Those are the scripts that are running in your hard drive. And if you don't update that code, then, you're never going to, as you said, reach that fuller potential. There's so much more opportunity there for you.
I'd love for you to dive into that more, but I'm sure you have in one of your 100 episodes.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of that. I mean, that's really all I talk about, is just understanding that your mind is like a computer, and your conscious mind, you're the computer programmer, but really the unconscious mind is the hard drive, and it runs programs that were installed when we were little boys and girls that we downloaded from those around us. Some of those programs are empowering, but many of them make us feel broken and wounded and weak or unworthy. And so as adults, we kind of reparent ourselves, or we got to reprogram ourselves and update. Your smartphones have updates all the time, but most of us are still walking around with the same MS-DOS program that we were born with. And so we need to upgrade those programs. And that is where you have the biggest breakthroughs and the most sustainable growth. And that's also where the resistance is. If you're ever trying, because usually I'm brought in to work with high performers who there's some kind of breakdown, and there's resistance and there's pushback, and we've got this physician or this, our VP or our, COO or someone is stuck in a mindset, and, we don't know what to do to get through to them. And so I come in and I start looking for the unconscious beliefs. And if you upgrade the belief, it shifts everything else. You don't have to deal with everything else. It's faster than therapy and executive coaching and their traditional approaches that are out there. Yeah.
And I wonder how you can, it feels like the participant has to be willing to explore that. And the challenge that we had with the leaders that we're talking about in the polarity is the old mindset, right? They're stuck in these unconscious beliefs, but I don't know that there's a desire to change because it's working for them.
Yes. Unless you understand what their human needs are, if they have that need for certainty, if they have that need for power and control, then they're not going to be open to it, because that will be viewed as a threat. So what you do in a savvy way is you figure out what they emotionally are trying to accomplish, and then you give it to them. So if I'm working with someone, and that's my next question, so we'll dive into this, right? When we talk about ego a little bit. But when somebody is really pushing back, it just means that they're threatened, right? Not necessarily scared, because a lot of these people are very tough. So they don't really get scared, but they will feel threatened. And so if I know that they're looking to feel important, then I'll help them feel that way, but not like I'm blowing smoke, because they'll know that too, because everybody is usually doing that to them, right? So it's this balance of saying something, throwing in a challenge, and then lifting them up, and then throwing in a challenge and then lifting them up, because it'll cause them to respect you, and then also be curious where you're going with this. right? And then I call that, fish on, because now you got them hooked because they want to know what's your angle here. And then when you start to show them a couple other new ways of showing up that could get them what they want, but not be so stressful. Because I've met a lot of very, very powerful, wealthy people. And they look like they're the most unhappy person in the building. Right? They never smile. They never, you never see them laughing, and, they've got all kinds of health challenges. And so anyway, that's a little bit of how I do it. And it's been very effective.
Well, one thing that, I've been really passionate about, and this is on the same thread, is I've been really fortunate because I have access to lots of amazing coaches or leadership programs. I mean, and these are thousands of dollars a year that are not accessible to a lot of people. And so, how do we democratize access to, what you do or what these other programs do, so that people that are willing to learn can get access to it and go on that journey? And that's, I guess a question for you, but how have you thought about that? Because what you're doing is really important and needed, but it's not accessible because not everyone can hire you as a private coach, right?
Yeah. So I had a big challenge with that because I grew up, not having a lot of money. My dad was a steel worker, right? And so electrician at US Steel. And so, I always felt like we had plenty, but he was making about 60,000 a year, right? And then he got hurt, in a big fire at the mill. And so it was some tough times that we went through. And so as I started becoming more successful, I didn't want anybody to be left behind because they couldn't afford it, because I knew how that felt. Right. I couldn't afford hardly anything when I started out. I got most of my education, even though I got my degrees in psychology. I feel like I got my best education in the library, renting audiobooks, and just stacks of audiobooks. You're going to let me take 10 of these? I can just take them? What? This is awesome. Right. And so these cassette tapes, put them in my Walkman. I'm dating myself now, but I would listen and listen and listen. And so, the way that I've put it together is a lot of my stuff I just give away for free, or I do really low end recorded programs so that everybody has access to it.
Good.
And then at my age now, I charge more for personal coaching because I've done tens of thousands of individual sessions with everybody. And I've trained a lot of people to do what I do, and I'm planning on training more. And so there's going to be plenty of people to be taken care of. But I even considered charging people for this Mesmerizing CEO Secrets program, because it is amazing, right? To give people access to all these amazing insights that you're sharing with us. And I thought, nope, I'm giving it away. Away, and so,
you're doing your part. That's awesome to hear. And it's not very common, actually.
Yeah. Well, thank you for setting that up. I appreciate the question. So let me flip it right back to you then. So, So the question is, you talk about egoless leadership and letting go of the fear of scrutiny or judgments of others. So I think that's just so important, because that's one of the reasons why people, they dig in, because they're so afraid of what's going to happen to me. What are my competitors going to think of me? What of my, shareholders going to think of me? So how did you get to that journey of trying to let go of that ego and not care anymore about if others are going to judge you because you're wearing a t-shirt?
Yeah, this is a lifelong journey, I'm sure, for everyone. But for me, I think it has to do with authenticity. And I think there's also appropriate times to show up, in a suit, right? If I meet a client that works for the government, like an elected official, I'm going to wear a suit because that's what you do. And that shows certain respect for the role, maybe. And so there's social norms, and I don't want to confuse that with conforming into, what people expect from us. But I think the paradigm too, maybe, is like, there's people that want to be seen and there's people that see others. And I'm sure it's not binary, but I'm much more interested in understanding others than I am about people seeing me. And that's what makes this show ironic, right? Because I'm sharing, some thoughts about things that you're asking me about, But it's not at all because I care about people think that that was a really cool conversation, or Dustin's a good guy, or like, that's great if someone thinks that. And if they don't think that, that's fine too.
No, everybody has to think that. That's how it is. Everybody has to think that.
they're gonna think one or the other. And but where do we get caught up in like caring about that, and then that changing how we behave, right? And that's the problem. Like, I'm not showing up differently because I'm looking for approval or disapproval, right? And so when I think about leading without ego, like, that's what it is about. It's about seeing others. It's about not wanting to be seen. But that can be too far, where if you push yourself so far down, then you don't have a platform to share things that might be impactful for other people, right? And that's maybe what this is for me. And so it's not binary, and there is a balance, but it's really about making decisions not from your own self-interest, but from others, right? Just to tie this all back together. And I think that a lot of leaders today, especially elected officials, especially hired guns, maybe, of like executives, they come from that place of recognition and wanting to be seen.
Yeah, that's how you have job security. That's how you get promoted. That's how you get the raises. That's how a lot of people think you got to climb that corporate ladder. And once you get to where you need to be, then you can be philanthropic and a nice person.
That's how we're conditioned, right? Someone was saying this the other day in a podcast I was listening to. We're conditioned where, like, there's a score in everything we do, whether it's our grades or a game. And like, we know clearly who's the winner and who wasn't, or if you passed or failed. And there's a lot more complexity to life than those ways of thinking. And so how do we invite that into the dialogue a little bit more, and maybe break some of those old limiting beliefs, which is your expertise? But
yeah, that's really good, Dustin. It's kind of like, what's your score on you being a giver, or you being a conscious capitalist, or you being someone who is happy?
But if you give because you're supposed to give because you have a lot of money, but it's not authentic, that's making an impact. But I guess for me, I can sleep at night with whatever decisions I make, because I know that I'm operating within a value set that's important to me, and I'm operating consistently within that value set.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. So you can give money, but if you don't really care about it, or it doesn't mean anything to you, you're not getting the joy that comes from giving. So you're getting ripped off. Even though you're giving, you're getting ripped off of the joy of the little hit of dopamine or serotonin that's released in your brain from being altruistic and caring about people, and knowing that what you're going to do is going to really lift somebody up. And
I think as we talk about profit and purpose, or there's a lot of corporate social responsibility. There's a lot of things that have been thrown around in the last 10 years. And the challenge is, it's hard to connect that social impact to what is core at that business and what they do. So, our team going to build houses for Habitat, like, is definitely impactful for that one day that we go do that and we get some team building, but we don't know how to build houses, and we write software. And for the most part, we don't know these things. And so what if we leverage our core competencies and align that to something we cared about? Like, that feels way more authentic to me than going to do something because you're supposed to, or because you have to.
That's really, really well said. I like that a lot. Because, I used to say that having a Friday pizza party does not mean you have a great culture.
Yeah. There's a lot of things. That we could add to that list.
Yeah, right.
Foosball, right? Video games.
Yes, a massage chair. All those fun things that with the food cart that you push around, because everybody loves food as a perk, right? But I love that. I really think that you're right, that building a house for Habitat for Humanity, or filling backpacks, or doing a food pantry, or a bake sale. All the wonderful, that's great. If that really is a part of your culture, and you're doing it because you're having fun giving, and you're raising money, and you have the same spirit that goes into every other day, that goes into everything that you're doing, you really have a passion and a purpose that allows you to get up and be excited about the day. So you're getting from the day instead of just trying to get through the day.
Yeah. Or, with the habitat, right? Like, I'm not an effective builder. And so going out there, if that's all I did every day and I went to build a house for habitat, they're getting a lot more value from me too. And so by leveraging my core competency, they're going to get a lot more value. And so how do we align those things is one of the challenges I think that we need to fix and solve for. But it still feels like a nice to have, not a have to have for companies. Mm-hmm. And that feels like it's on the early adopter curve still, as like conscious leaders are, that will hopefully get more traction as we progress, as a world, really, and as a society.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes that there's steps that people have got to go through. And if you've never done any kind of charity work, showing up and pounding some nails in a wall or painting a room can be something that teaches you. The first level is you're going to do something without any expectation of getting anything back, just being a giver, right? But then as you keep doing it more, you realize that you actually get a lot out of doing that. It feels good to give. It feels good to take care of others. It feels good to, especially if you're meeting the people, like my son and I have built houses for veterans and homeless veterans. And then we met them the day they moved in. And that was awesome. Sit down, hear their story. It was a lot different than just, paint a room and then leave.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And maybe you have to go through those cycles just to appreciate it and to find that alignment too.
Yeah, I think that it is natural. People go through these growth stages. Yeah, very good. So here's something that's been a hot topic lately. So you believe in transparency in the workplace.
Yep.
So what would you say to leaders who think that might make them vulnerable, or even that vulnerability equals weakness in some way?
Well, I think vulnerability equaling weakness sounds like an old script from the old days.
Yeah.
And thanks to Brene Brown and other leaders like that, that's become more of a topic that people are embracing.
Yes.
And then around transparency, I think, which is vulnerable, by the way, to be transparent. We share financials with the whole company. We have open comp, and there's a lot of issues with transparency. I mean, it holds us accountable to make decisions correctly and well, and so I like it for that reason. And it's also really frustrating when if you paid, this new person $5,000 more, they'd come with you, and now they won't because you can't meet their current comp, and because it doesn't fit into the model. That's frustrating too. And so, how do you find the balance in all these things is the key. But I think, we're really extreme on the transparency side. I believe we are, and we do it in Mexico too with our team there, which is even less unheard of in Mexico in that culture than it is in the United States. But it's still not very common. I think it just holds us accountable and puts us to a higher level and standard that we have to rationalize our decisions, and we have to be able to, stand in front of the team and make sure that we can make these logical arguments and that we're treating everyone fairly.
Well, I would think too, when you're sharing it with your team, you're getting feedback, and it might show you some loopholes or some opportunities you might have missed.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to, right, we hire smart people. I'm not any smarter than anyone else at my company. I have a different set of experiences. I have access to maybe different skills, and I have access to data and information. So if I can give them access to all the data and information that I have, and they can bring their unique perspective and their unique skills to the table, then I wonder what kind of decisions we can make together. And that was the motivation behind transparency, is to really empower autonomy with that shared set of values, so that we can make things that are in alignment, decisions that are in alignment with each other and what's in the best interest of all stakeholders.
Yeah, well said. When I first heard the concept of transparency, I was listening and trying to figure out what the beliefs were around it. And some of the beliefs were that leadership was worried that employees were going to be mad because, of the pay discrepancy and how leaders were earning more than others. And but that really wasn't the case. In fact, what happened is that, well, there were some problems, if they were men were getting paid more than women and things like that was in there that now all of a sudden everybody knows about. And so they needed to correct it, which was good, so that should have happened. And so that was a good thing about it. But it was also this fear that somehow people were going to be mad once they saw the numbers. And I found that actually it was the opposite. When there was a problem or there were challenges or the company was having a hard time, because people were aware of what was going on and they had all the information, it allowed them to really step up and form a story in their mind about how they were going to rally for their team, because their team trusted them by sharing this information with them, as opposed to the old theory.
Exactly right. It builds trust. And the two reasons you said that people were nervous about sharing both had the word fear in them. And so like doing things out of fear, right, is probably a flag that we can change something in how we're looking at things, but operating out of fear of something, I mean, logically sounds silly as we talk about it now, but yeah, that's why people are afraid to share. And yeah, if there's a pay discrepancy between executives and others, then that's a problem to solve for, or male and female, or right. I mean, those are problems to fix.
Yeah. Those and problems, are opportunities, right? Opportunities to grow trust, to grow strength, to become stronger, and to make sure that everybody has the same story. There was so many times I would go into a company and the biggest problem is that leadership knew there was a problem and they weren't telling anybody what it was. The executive team wasn't sharing what was going on. And so instead of telling one unified story, you have hundreds of people making up their own stories.
Yeah. And so you just nailed it. Like without transparency, we're worried about what they're going to think of this or this. They already are telling those stories, but they're controlling the narrative. And usually it's not going to be near as generous as if you share the actual story, which is true. It's probably far less dramatic than the story they're telling themselves.
Yeah. Well said. So you had mentioned before not being afraid of getting ripped off, and that you enjoy teaching your competitors how to create stronger workplace cultures. And many might think that would hurt your business, but what have you discovered from doing that?
Well, yeah, I believe that so much that we started a spinoff, which is an employee engagement platform to help companies measure culture. So I'm passionate about the movement of conscious business, of people first cultures, where we treat people like people and not like resources or things to be leveraged. And I think around that, what you just mentioned, how that came up was, if competitors call me, and we in entrepreneurial circles, we all talk a lot in different groups that we're in, but then in our specific business, there's maybe a different network that I also talk to a lot, because it helps us keep a pulse on the market and what's going on. But I'll share openly, and I've had others share openly with me too that were further along the road than I am. And I'm happy to share what's worked for us and what hasn't, because I think the more businesses that are out there doing things the right way, in my opinion, the better that we're going to get through this kind of period and on the other side of what we've been talking about for the last hour or so. And so I'm not afraid to share. I also have a small side, if I pull out the competitive spirit as well, because it's important to be balanced, that if I'm sharing everything with you and you're doing it all as I share it with you, I'm already moved on to something else that's I'm also doing that I don't know if it's working yet. And so if you're only doing what I'm sharing with you, then I'm always going to be a little bit ahead of you. And so but I'm more coming from the altruistic place without expecting anything in return of wanting to share things that are valuable so others can benefit from it too.
That's excellent, Dustin. I love that. So I've shared so much and given away so many things, and people over the years are like, aren't you afraid they're going to steal your stuff? I'm like, take it. I got more.
That's perfect. And I have a coach that I've seen. There's a program called Stegan out of Dallas. And I went through this 1-year program, and it's very expensive. And then I was going to start teaching the material to my team. And I kept calling them. I'm like, how do I license this? Or like, I want to stay in integrity with the content. And the founder just kept telling me, like, as long as you're using it and teaching it, not someone else, and it's for your stakeholders, and you're not making money by selling it, then you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
And that was their criteria. And I asked them like 5 different times over like 3 or 4 months, just to make sure, because there's a lot of valuable content there that they produce. And I wanted a chance to share that. And I was so grateful that they were willing to do that. And I think your approach to that is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I'm appreciating that.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. All right. So let me see here. You have said that being your authentic self invites others to do the same. So we've kind of talked about that already, being authentic and why it's such a powerful characteristic. So I'm going to move on from that one. I've got two more for you. So you currently work with a lot of entrepreneurs. What are some of the limiting beliefs that you see are holding people back from reaching a fuller potential these days, like right around with COVID and everything else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're probably way more qualified to answer that than I am, but I'll try. I think we hit on it earlier, like the idea of fear and not doing things out of fear.
Yeah.
It feels really important in that thread.
Yeah.
I think, for me, I never even identified with the term entrepreneur until I was like 35. I'm 45 now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we trust ourselves more? And when you're bringing authenticity forward and there's congruence, right? And I'm not someone different at home that I am at work.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a lot easier to then have that inner kind of confidence or self to bring forward. So there feels like a thread around there too. I'd love for you to add on to that though, what you've seen.
Well, I mean, I love what you said. And I think that one of the interesting beliefs that I've observed is that before COVID, a lot of executives and C-suite execs were afraid of having a remote workforce because there was this unconscious belief. Well, it wasn't really unconscious, but there was a belief that you had to keep your eye on your people or the engagement's going to go down. They're not going to do their work, right? And so you always got to keep them in one place. And then as we went through this last year with COVID, they found that actually employee engagement increased because people didn't have to do the drive time. They could roll out of their pajamas right over to their computer and start working, instead of driving to work, 30 minutes there and back. And so, of course, anxiety was on the rise before COVID, and COVID didn't help that at all. So there was a lot of burnout that was happening as well. So the new belief is that the hybrid model is kind of the new way of working in the 21st century. Because if you survey employees and you say, what's the one thing that you're missing? Do you need a better phone, better laptop? You need a stapler? What do you need? And the common reply was others, my teammates, it's not the same on Zoom. And so, coming in a couple of days just for the camaraderie and joking around and being with each other. And then the other days where you're at home because it enhances your lifestyle. So that was one of the more interesting beliefs.
Yeah, I love that. I think, and that's a separate kind of rabbit hole we don't have to go down, but the employers that are forcing people to come back into an office is just short-sighted to me. It feels really, I look forward to it, frankly, because that means that I get to hire those people away from those companies. And hiring is really challenging right now. So they should keep doing that.
That's funny. There's a tip for you right there. I hope everybody caught that.
I think you're right. The hybrid model is that's what we've adopted too, without going into too much detail. And I think that's the right approach for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, it's all having a great culture is about having great conversations all the time. And getting the pulse on where your people are at and talking to them and finding out what's going on and what matters to them and how you can help improve their quality of life, because happy employees are going to be very engaged, loyal employees. And so even if they have to take a hit on salary, if they know that you're there for them and you care about their quality of life and their family and you've done things, they're going to stick with you through those tough times. Right. And so the best companies that go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, here's an example of the stakeholder model as it relates to this, all together in a boat. And so I asked around about this. And so I don't think this is a unique idea, but it's one that I hadn't heard of yet. And especially in COVID, as we came out of it, like everyone wanted to get back together, but a lot of people had either let their office space go or they had shut it down. And meanwhile, there's a lot of restaurants out there in the community who are only open for dinner service, and they just got hit really hard for COVID, and they might need new revenue streams or other ways to monetize their space. So I wanted to go partner with local restaurants so we could take over during the day. They might cater lunch for us or something. It's a revenue stream for the restaurant. It lets me get my team together in a way and support the restaurant at the same time. So like that's a stakeholder model where we all went together. And we got really far down the road with some places here in Austin and never pulled the trigger just because it's never quite died down yet. But that's still on the list of, like, when we think about community or stakeholders, that's a really simple way to bring that into the equation to create value across multiple stakeholders without the business having to take a lease down for 10, 20, 30,000 a month or whatever, right, on space that may or may not get used.
Yeah, very creative, very creative. This has been so good. Dustin Wells, Headspring. Dustin, how can people learn more about you and Headspring?
Well, they can come to Austin. I'm here. And when I'm not here, I'm other places. But headspring.com is our website. I'm on Twitter as well. And so they can go find me there. LinkedIn is fine as well. And we'd love to hear feedback or thoughts or questions. Just keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have all those links in the show notes. So Dustin, thank you so much for being so mesmerizing. There was so much high quality content, lots of great insights and strategies. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for what you're doing. It was really a pleasure.
Hey, it's Tim. You ever wonder why so many talented, hardworking entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with inconsistent self-belief or high stress or procrastination or self-sabotage? Well, the answer may surprise you, and the solution is already inside of you. I've been searching for the answers to this for decades, and I found them, and I put it into a new program called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind, Mental Secrets for Accelerating Success. And because you're a listener, I want to give you a free VIP copy. Head over to powermindsetprogram.com. That's powermindsetprogram.com and grab your copy today.